Hello, 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 hello. Are we live? Let me just check. Sorry. Okay, Sakale, I do hear you. I will do everything in English. Do not worry about it. Let's take like a 2 minutes ka buffer and so everyone can join. Okay, I'll just get back, get some water. 2 minute में और लोग आ जाएंगे. Then we'll start. All right, all right. How many people are here? Let's have a look. Last time we covered functions basics, the absolute basics of functions in Python. And I told you that there are more things to Python functions, and we're going to look at them today. Some advanced tech, I'll say some advanced application of Python functions, some, mm, what can I say? There are different things, different. We have only seen like 30% of implementation of what Python functions can do. We can do so much more. So that is what we're gonna do today. Uh, so as soon as a few people show up, we're gonna start. Sorry. Can someone tell me if I am properly audible and I'm properly visible? Then we can start and yeah, we can take it from there. So there are a few things we're gonna talk about today. If you're in first year, I will suggest learning AI ML and see if you like it. Because in AI ML, there will be mainly things like linear algebra, like the mathematical part I'm talking about. There will be linear algebra, then there will be probability, there will be statistics, and there will be a little bit of calculus. If you go into AIDS, however, there will be obviously these things will be there, but more focus will be on statistics and probability. So you have to go into machine learning first and look at all these things, how the algorithms work and everything, and then you figure out okay, do you like the algorithmic aspect, do you like the model building aspect of AI, or do you like the data science aspect, that is the statistical aspect of AI? Whichever you like, you can go into that, but I'll just say start off with AI/ML. So you have the, if you start with AI/ML, you have the option to go into DS at any point you want. But if you start with AI/DS, it is a little bit harder comparatively to come into AI/ML. I hope that helps. All right, so a few things we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about scopes. What are scopes? We're going to definitely see that and see how different types of scopes are, and then how a function defines a whole new scope inside a function, inside a program. Sorry, how a function defines a whole new scope inside a program, and ये सब कुछ हम देखेंगे. इसके अलावा we will see what is the scopes of a function, what are the different scopes of variables, and how to switch different scopes, right? How to change the scope of a variable. And beyond that, we will also have like lambda functions. That's just another pretty interesting way of writing Python functions. Again, lambda functions does not exist in any other language, another Python specific feature that is there. इसके अलावा we'll also have something called recursion. Now recursion is in a way an algorithm that uses functions, a particular strategy, a particular set of steps, a new way of thinking about functions. And it will be whenever you are talking about, whenever you are studying DSA, right? Whenever you're studying data structures and algorithms. So whenever you're doing that, because data structures and algorithm is a very crucial part when you're going for any tech interview. तुम कोई भी coding interview में जाओ, there will be one question, one very big question about data structures and algorithms that will take up like 60 to 70% of your time of the interview. And if you cannot solve that question, it's basically tata bye bye. Okay, so DSA is very important. So whenever you're learning DSA, you have to know about these things. Key, whenever you're learning DSA, one of the algorithms that is very common and very popular is the recursion. And recursion is a very unorthodox type of algorithm. Like, it doesn't come on the top of your mind very easily. So you have to be very well versed with recursion. So by what do I mean by well versed is that you have to be very like familiar with recursion. You have to understand how exactly it works and why it works. And three, you have to have done quite a lot of questions in recursion, so that whenever you face a problem that can be solved with recursion, you at least get the idea that, oh, this might be solved with recursion. And recursion makes like very big problems get solved in very easy, like it shrinks the code like 10 times. So that's very easy. Okay, let's have a look at the chat. Are you, sir, can you share AIML what are subjects in first year, and can you share the notes of AIML IIT notes? Please share notes on your YouTube channel. Actually, there are no notes for AIML. Nobody, I don't, I'm pretty sure nobody made notes, because we used to get like, for all the ML courses, for every course almost, we used to get either some book recommendation, or mainly it was PPTs. And uh, those PPTs actually cannot be shared outside of the institution. So it will be illegal for me to share the PPTs outside of my college to anyone. So I wouldn't like to do that publicly. I mean, not even privately, I wouldn't like to do that. So other than that, the subjects that you have to study in first year, see, if you're learning by yourself, if you're going on the self-taught route, if it's the self-learning route, you don't have to worry about what is in first year, what is in second year. You keep learning, you start learning, and you keep learning whatever is coming your way. As if you can finish your 4 year all the AIML thing that is taught in 4 year, you can finish all that in 1.5 year, maybe 2 year. That's good for you. Then you can build more projects, land a internship, land a job even quicker. Why worry about what is in first year, what is in second year? Start and then keep going. Do not stop, with full understanding, that is. All right, so these are the few things we're going to talk about today mainly. There is another session after this. I think Jay Bhaiya is taking another session at around 7:30. So we'll have to wrap up pretty quickly. We have about an hour left. So let's get started. So what is a scope? Okay, what is a scope? A scope is basically means the area of effectiveness inside a program. That what is a scope is like, let me give an example. I have a driving license. Okay, maybe I have a driving license, or maybe I have a college ka ID card. I have a ID card in my college, you also have a ID card in your college, but that ID card has a scope. Agar you go to the airport and they ask you for an identity proof, या फिर you go to the police and for some reason and they ask you for identity proof, or you're applying for a life insurance and they ask you for an identity proof, if you show them your college ID card, it's not going to work. Why? Because it has a limited scope. Your college ID card is only valid inside your college premises. तुम्हारे campus के अंदर, if you're going into if you're going out of college, coming into college, if you're going into some library or something, I don't know, every college is different, but there, only inside your campus, only inside your college is your ID card valid. So although it's a very important and very like crucial thing, a very crucial document, very crucial identification proof inside your college, it does not matter outside of your college. So the scope of your college ID card is your campus. That is a very easy way to understand. Similarly, maybe a driving license is has a scope of, like, if you have a driving license in India, that driving license is only valid in India. If you go to the US and show your Indian driving license, it's not gonna work. So that's a very easy way to understand scopes. Now, how does it affect us when you are writing code? So let's declare a variable called a. We give it value 10. Okay, now let's declare a function def. I don't know. It can be called process. You can name it anything. It can be called process, and let's declare the variable a again and give it a value of 20. Now, if we print a, what is gonna be the answer? Now, as you can see, if we run this code, nothing is gonna get printed. Why? Because the print statement is inside the function and the function has not been called. जब तक हम function को call नहीं करेंगे, the function is not gonna execute. The code inside it's never gonna get executed. So I have to call the function. Very well. There we called the function named process, and now what do you think will be printed when we say print a? Let's see. Let's see what it does. When we run it, we see that value 20 is getting printed. All right. Very cool. Very cool. Okay. Now, what happens if I change the value of a to 30 after writing the definition of the function? I change the value of a to 30. Now if I call the function, what is it gonna be? What will be the value of a? If we run it, you see it's 20 again. Now why is that? Right, why how is that happening? Or heck, let's try removing this. Let's try removing this, because we have already declared a. It shouldn't be a problem, right, to print a. Let's see what it does. Now it prints 10. But even if we change the value outside here, what is happening exactly is when we give another variable the name a and assign it a different value from the outside, Python understands that, okay, this is the new variable and its scope is only inside the its scope is basically only inside the function. So here it is 10 outside the function, and this variable is valid only outside this function, and this variable a is named is equal to 40. This variable is only valid inside this function. So if we print, let's also print a, see what happens. As you can see, when the function is called, the a value is 40 and that is printed. But when I try to print a, this a value has not changed. This a value has remained outside. So this a variable and this a variable are not the same. They're different. Any variable, so easy to remember, is any variable that is declared inside a function has its scope only inside the function. It does not affect the variables that are outside. Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Hi, Ashmita. I hope this makes a lot of sense. Okay, give me a thumbs up in the chat if that's possible. All right, I'll take that as a yes. I can see the emojis floating. All right, so let's go ahead and see what if we need these two to be the same variable. What if maybe there's a problem? Maybe there's a problem of, okay, suppose there are 100 apples. Okay, You have 100 apples, you and your friend. Let's give two names. One can be Ben and one can be Ken. Okay, very easy. So we'll call this Ben and Ken. Let's have 100 apples. So apples is equals to 100. So apples is a variable that stores the number. All right, very simple. Now what we're gonna do, maybe we're gonna define two functions that whenever Ben goes to the kitchen, he eats one apple. But whenever Ken goes to the kitchen, he eats two apples. Now we want to see how many apples are left after maybe a certain period of time. So let's define two different functions for one Ben going to the kitchen and for Ken going to the kitchen. Ben eat now the problem appears because we need two functions, right? I'll show you def can eat, and then we're gonna basically call them a few times for in range 5 then eat for I in range 7 can eat print apples. So what is happening here, what I am trying to do is, see, we have these functions, these two functions. I have not written any code inside them, but these are two functions. This defines one time if Ben goes to the kitchen. This is what when Ken goes to the kitchen. Now we are doing this for loops, like Ben goes into the kitchen 5 times and Ken goes into the kitchen 7 times, so that we can change these numbers. I am using a loop so that we can change these numbers, and at the end हमको क्या करना है, हमको apples की value print करनी है, which is the remaining number of apples. Now the problem is, if we change the value of apples inside the Ben eat function, what the problem will be is the value that we change inside apples will only be changed inside Ben eats. And even if we use that, how will it get like updated here, right? No matter what we do to apples inside this function, this value is going to stay 100 because this does not have a scope inside the functions, and the apples inside the function does not have a scope outside the function. So there has to be some way that we can use this very variable, this apples variable, inside this function and this function, so both of them can reduce the value whenever they go into the kitchen. So how do we do that? So in terms of scopes, variables are divided into two parts. One is a local variable and one is a global variable. Very easy to understand. Your college ID card is a local variable inside your college. Maybe your PAN card is your PAN card or your passport is a global variable. It is valid at every country, in every country of the world, at any point of the world, it is variable. And even in India, if you're talking about a passport, it's that very passport. It doesn't matter where it is considered, it is that very passport or that very PAN card. But if it's a college ID, it's different. It's different everywhere, right? Your college ID will work here. If you go into a new college, you'll get a new college ID, and your old college ID will not be valid there. Your new college ID will not be valid in your old college. That's exactly how it works. So, how whenever we basically declare a variable inside a function, it is declared as a local variable because its default scope is inside the function. It is by default a local variable. So if you want to use a variable that is global, declare a new variable that is global, or just use a variable that is outside of the function that is already declared outside of the function, like you can see here, apples equals to 100. So that's when we write global, sorry, we write global apples. In this we'll also write global apples. So what this tells this function that this is not a new variable. Go look into the global scope. There must be a variable that is called apples and use that apples. Okay. So as soon as you write global apples, now this apples variable that has a scope inside this is this variable only. There are no two different apples variables. This is the same variable. And then we can do things like, okay, whenever Ben goes into the kitchen, apples minus equals to 1. Whenever Ken goes into the kitchen, apples minus equals to 2. And if we see if Ben goes 5 times and Ken goes into the kitchen 7 times, we'll see the value has reduced to 81 as it should be. Because 7 into 2 is 14 and plus 5 is 19. 100 minus 19 is 81. If we can want to change it, let Ben go in 10 times and Ken go in 10 times. So it should be 1 plus 2 equals to 3 into 10, 30, and 100 minus 30 should be 70. You see, the number is 70 because the apples value is getting changed. We can also see it like we print Ben goes to kitchen, and then also print number of, okay, I don't know, number of, right, remaining apples, and then print apples. Oops, sorry, I'll do the same thing here as well. Instead of Ben, now Ken goes into the kitchen, and we'll be able to see exactly what is going on. Let's turn this to 4 and turn this to 3. So now if I maximize the console, you'll be able to see that, okay, Ben goes into the kitchen 1 time, so 100 becomes 99. Ben again goes into the kitchen, 98. Again goes 2 more times, 97 and 96. Now Ken goes into the kitchen, 96 becomes 94. Ken again goes into the kitchen 2 more times, 94 to 92 to 90, and we have 90 apples left. So that is exactly how local and global variables work. How you can use a global variable inside a function. Okay, now this global variable can be declared inside the function as well or outside the function as well, but it needs to have this keyword called global. There is no but the local keyword is not used because by default everything is a local variable. If you want it to be a global variable, you have to tell it, you have to declare it. All right, I hope that is understandable. Okay, after that we are gonna get into, before we get into lambda functions, we have another thing to cover, and that is nested functions. Now, as the name suggests, you can probably understand what is nested functions. We saw what nested loops are. Nested loops are basically loops inside of loops. What is nested ifs? There is called one if statement inside another if statement, and it can have like different levels, multiple levels. We can have an if statement inside an if statement inside an if statement, and similar for loops. We can have a for loop inside a for loop inside a for loop inside a while loop inside a for loop. It's valid, not a very good coding practice, but it is valid. But so what is a nested function? It is a function inside another function, inside another function, possibly. So how does it work? Let's define a function. Let's call this function1, and let's have a string, hello world. Now let's define another function, function2. You can see this function is defined inside this function. How do we know that? Because of the indentation. Anything that is indented to this level is inside this function. If this was declared here, this will be a different function, completely unrelated. But as it's there, this function is inside the statements of this function. Okay. Now this can do anything, maybe print s. This will print whatever the value of s is. Okay. Now this function will not run, obviously. See, now what this does is again another problem of scope. Function 1 is declared inside the main function. The main function means the main program. It is also called the main function. We will see why later. If you are learning in any other language other than Python, you will see what the main function is. Okay. So this function 2 is declared inside this function 1. So everything that happens in function 2 has a scope of this function 1. So s that is declared here will be considered in printing s over here. And as usual, this print statement will not get executed unless we call the function. So we'll have to call function 2. Only then this print s is gonna get printed. But even then, it is not gonna get printed because this very function has not been called. So we have to call that function as well. Function 1. And there we call it. And if we try to print, we can see hello world got printed. Now, this function, can we call function 2 over here? See there, it becomes an error. What? It is a name error, and we have to be very cautious about this. Okay, we don't get scared of errors. You have to be very good at tackling errors. So first thing that you have to do, your error always tells you what is wrong. Your error always tells you exactly where it is wrong and what is the problem, and you can just take that, go into Google and search it to find out what is wrong and how to fix it, because there's a 1 in a million chance that this is a problem that only you have faced. There is a very high chance, almost always, that particular problem has been faced by thousands of other people, and they have internet forums like Stack Overflow, like other websites like Geek for Geeks have guides and all these things to tell you exactly how to solve these things, or maybe even learn a little bit. So this says name error. Name function 2 is not defined. What does that mean? But we have defined function 2. See, the problem is function 2 is defined inside of function 1. So the scope of function 2 is only available inside of function 1. It can happen with anything. You can have maybe another variable called a that is equals to 10 inside of function 1. Now, if we try to print a, we will get the same result because a only exists inside function 1. Your college ID only is valuable only is valid inside your college. So we cannot call function 2 here. We have to call function 1, and then this gets executed. While executing, we get the s value, then we get the a value, then we see, oh, there's another function. Let's get this defined. What does function 2 say? Print s. Okay, function 2 is registered. Then we call function 2. Okay, what is function 2? Print s. What is s? Hello world. Alright, we can try to print a as well. Then we will get 10 because function 1 calls function 2 and function 2 prints a, and function 2 is inside the scope of function 1, and the value of a inside the scope of function 1 is 10. So we are getting 10. Very simple. All right. All right. That is good. I hope you guys are understanding. Okay, if we are done with function inside a function, are we? Are we done with function inside a function? Okay, then we can move on to lambda functions. All right, what are lambda functions? Lambda functions are another way of writing functions in a very small syntax. So instead of writing like 4 or 5 lines of code, or maybe sometimes 10 lines of code, we can write the whole function in like one line. That is what lambda function does. And again, this is something only available with Python. दूसरे languages में ये सब नहीं होता. So Python के जो benefits है, one of them is the lambda function, that you can write things very neatly. You can write even like for loops. You can even write if else statements in one line, as we saw before. So yes, for loops and if else statement के लिए there is no lambda involved. It's very basic. You just take, there's a particular syntax that we talked about in the previous lectures when we talked about if else statements, conditional statements. You can go ahead and check them out. Other than that, we also have the lambda function. So what does the lambda function do? Let's define a very simple function. Okay, let's define a function for cubing a number. So it will take a value, maybe n, and it will, what will it do? So let's have the result equals to n into n into n. You can also write it as result. I mean, you can obviously also write it at n to the power 3. That also works, but let's just keep it simple. N into n into n. This will also help us understand what are the functions of lambda. So this is a good one. Okay, then we have to return the value as usual. Whenever we want something to be assigned from a function, we have to use a return value. Return value is what? We have to return result. Very simple. So if we do cube of 3, what is going to happen? Cube of 3 is not going to print anything because there is no print statement. It is just going to return the value of result. So what we have to do? We have to print the value of cube 3, because it's gonna return 3 into 3, 9 into 3, 27, and it is gonna print the value of 27. Let's see what happens. It is printing 27. Let's try 5. It should give 125, and it is giving 125. Cool, very cool. So how can we write this in a very even smaller chunk? Right, let's try writing it like this. So this is how it's written. We'll name the next function cube1, okay, or cube 2. Let's name it cube 2, and the lambda functions are not written like this. We write them like this. Okay, cube 2 equals to, it is declared as a variable. It is not a variable. It looks like a variable in terms of the declaration. I'm trying to say कि variables जैसे declare होते हैं, a lambda function is declared in a very similar way. It is the syntax looks same. So what you write is lambda x colon x star x star x. So what does this do? Lambda tells us कि okay, this is a lambda function. Okay, hold up. This is not a variable. This is a lambda function. What are the arguments? We are taking in x. Okay, and after this colon is the return value. What are we returning? X star x star x. We can write x to the power 3 over here. So let's see what this is doing. Let's try printing cube 2 of 4. As you can see, cube of 5 is 125, and cube 2 is working as well. 4 into 4, 16 into 4, 64. That is also working. Cube 2, let's try cube 2 of 10, and it is giving us 1000, which is the value of 10 cube. We can try different things here. We can literally try different things here. We can say x star star 3 if x 2 x percentage 2 equals to 1 equals to 0, else x star star 2. What this will do? What will this do? Let's get rid of this for now. We are only working on 10. So as I said, Python is a very readable language. It's a very readable language कि इसको तुम देख के, इसको तुम पढ़ के, you are understanding what is happening. So it is basically a function, and what is happening is it is checking. Okay, we're taking an argument, we're taking a parameter of x. So x is the input that we're putting in the function, and then what is the return value? Return value is x to the power 3 x cube if x divided by 2 gives a remainder of 0, which means x is an even number. So if x is an even number, return cube. Else, if it's not an even number, return x square. Let's see if that works. As you can see, 10 is an even number, so x cube is returned. Let's try 5, which is an odd number. And you can see it returns 25. Because it is an odd number, it is returning this else statement, that is x square. Is that understood? I hope that is understood. Okay, we will move beyond that. We will move beyond that to see another point to be noted, that is functions that are basically functions in Python as a superpower. Again, just like everything else is Python, functions in Python also have a superpower, and that is functions in Python can return any data type, not just integers, characters, variables, not just integers, characters, and floats. It can also return a list of characters, a list of variables of any data type. It can even return a list of list. दूसरे languages में, in going into Java or C++, this is not possible. You cannot return a list or an array. But in Python, it is possible. Let's see. Function 1. Let's just call it function 1. Function 1, it will take a value, n, and then it will create a list. Let's not call it list. It will create a list. Let's call it array, and it will be an empty list. Then for I in range of n, add dot append I plus 1. And we'll also have a return statement, return that, and we'll print this return, function 1 7. Okay, what does this do? We are defining a function called function 1 that takes a parameter n. So what is inside the function? We declare a new list, an empty list called ar, and then we run a for loop for I in range n. It is gonna loop from 0 to n minus 1. And what is n? N is whatever number we are given here. So and what is happening in each iteration of the loop? In each iteration, a new value, append. If you have not seen it before, append means adding a new value to the list. So add.append, if we write, in whatever here we write, is going to be added to the list. So the first iteration, i's value is 0, and we are doing add.append 0 plus 1, 1. So 1 is added to the array. In the second iteration, we are adding the i's value is 1, and we are adding 1 plus 1, 2. In the third iteration, it's 2 plus 1, 3. And in the seventh iteration, ith value is n minus 1, that is 6. And what are we adding? 6 plus 1, 7. So we are basically adding all the values from 1 to n inside that list, and we are returning that very list. So we are outside the function. We are calling the function and trying to print the return value. Let's see if that works. As you can see, the function has actually successfully returned a whole list, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Let's change 7 to 17 and see. Now it is returning a list from 1 to 17, exactly how we wanted. Now, returning a list in any other language, returning an array, as they call it in other languages, is not this easy. Okay, you cannot just use a variable name and just return it, because return generally in other languages, in almost every language other than Python, only returns one variable. It can be only one variable. So what they do, they find the address, because a list is basically a space in memory. Every variable is a particular space in the memory. Whenever we are creating a variable named a equals to 10, a is allocated a space in your computer memory, because how else will it be stored, right? Inside the memory, and that value 10 is stored there. When we create an array or a list, it's a sequence of these memories. Instead of one, if we have a list of 5 elements, 5 such blocks are defined and they are connected. Okay, so what other languages do, and what essentially Python is also doing, is Python is not actually returning the whole variable, the whole list. Python is referring to the list by just the address of the first block, the first memory that is allocated. Python is only returning that, and whenever you're trying to print a list, Python knows that, okay, a list variable is basically denoted by the first block, and whenever we deal with list, we consider the whole list, not just the first block. We see what are the whole list. So essentially, Python is also doing the same thing, but because it's Python, we do not have to worry about that. We can just think, okay, the whole list is getting returned. We do not have to think about how exactly it is doing it, and how other languages are not able to do it, but Python is doing it. That is how. But again, we do not need to worry about that. All right. So let's do another thing. Let's see what recursion is. I do not think we have enough time for recursion. Let's try to build a function that can use recursion, but we are not going to use recursion today. Let's do the conventional way without recursion. Do you guys know what the Fibonacci sequence is? Let's ditch Fibonacci. Let's do something easier. Something easier can be factorial. Do you know what factorial is? So factorial of a number n is written as n exclamation mark. That is written in mathematics, not here, not in code, but I'm just writing it like this. Key. Okay, what is n factorial? It is 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into dot 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 dot, and it goes on till into n minus 1 into n. That is what factorial is. Factorial n is multiplication of all the numbers, all the whole numbers from 1 to n. Okay, so what is factorial 3? It is 1 into 2 into 3, that is 6. What is factorial 5? It is 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5, that is 120. And that is how it goes. So let us try to write a function that will calculate the factorial of the any number we given. So how will you do it? Very simple. Let's call it fact. Let's call it fact. That sounds cool. Okay, we'll take a value n as a parameter, and what we'll do, we'll define a variable named product that will have the initial value 1, because if we keep the initial value to 0, multiplying it with anything will always return 0, so that is not what we want. And even if we don't multiply anything, we know 0 factorial is 1, and we know 1 factorial is also 1. Then from 2 factorial it becomes 2, then 6, then 24, then 120, then 720, and go so on. So we start with 1 because negative number factorials do not exist. So what we're going to do when we have the value n, so we're going to do for I in range n, we're going to iterate from 0 to n, and we're going to multiply prod with the value of I plus 1. Why I plus 1? Because if we start from, because whenever we're iterating from 0 to n, first value I takes is 0, and if we multiply prod with 0 it becomes 0, and उसके बाद matter नहीं करेगा how many numbers we multiply, it will always be 0. That's why we have to start with 1, then 2, then 3. So the first value I gets is 0, so we are starting with I plus 1, and then it also takes care of the other end कि if we just run with I, it only iterates till 0 to n minus 1. It does not go to n, but n factorial also includes n. Okay, so it final value that I takes is n minus 1. So as we are doing plus 1, that n minus 1 plus 1 becomes n. And what we have to do, so prod we get a value and then we have to return prod. Now let's type printing fact 4, maybe it should come out as 24, and it is very simple. If we try 6, it should come out as 720, and we are getting 720. Let's try 7. I don't remember the exact value, but it is okay, 5040. Very simple, very simple. And but there is a better way to do it, and that is recursion. Can you think of a better way to do it? We already talked about a function inside a function, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna define a function inside a function, except this time this can be a little bit mind-bending, that we're gonna define, not just gonna define, we're just gonna call a function inside itself, not some other function. So prod is equals to 1. We have to add a few more variables, few more conditionals here. If n is equal to 0 or n is equal to 1, then return 1. Then you don't need to do anything. Without this, what is the problem? I'll show you. Because when we have 0, this will not run, so that is a problem. And that is why it is always good to have some base statement. Okay, these things doesn't go by rule, because if you think about it, 0 factorial doesn't really make much of a sense intuitively. That is why it has been assigned a value. It has been assigned a value for reasons, but that is something that we have to keep in mind. Okay, these are base conditions. This does not come directly from any calculation, but these are important for the mathematics. So that is why if n equals to 0, return 1. You can even get rid of this. This can be taken care of in this part, but we can keep that as well. It's not a big problem. Also, you must keep in mind that whenever we are returning a value, the function ends. The function, whenever this gets satisfied and we return a value, this part is not considered. This one is not executed. Whenever we return a value, that function call is considered कि okay, मैंने value return कर दिया, मेरा काम खत्म, मैं चल रहा हूँ, बस, ठीक है? So that is something you have to keep in mind. And so I hope we all understand what is going on. तो ये base case होता है. Then we can also create something for a Fibonacci sequence. Fibonacci sequence अगर तुमको पता नहीं हो, let me just tell you what Fibonacci is. कैसे करना वगैरह है वो हम अगले दिन देखेंगे. Fibonacci sequence is a sequence of numbers which starts with 0, 1, and then every number in the sequence is a sum of the previous two numbers. तो 0, 1 है, उसका अगला नंबर क्या होगा? 0 plus 1, 1. अगला नंबर क्या होगा? 1 plus 1, 2. अगला नंबर क्या होगा? 1 plus 2, 3. And it goes on like that. ठीक है? And what happens now? 34. Then what comes now? 55. 89. And so on. That is what a Fibonacci sequence looks like. And it goes on for a very, till infinity. Right, Fibonacci sequence have a lot of amazing explanations, a lot of amazing. This is a sequence that is very closely related to the golden ratio. A golden ratio is something closely related to the universe. You, this is a pattern. ऐसे देख के तुमको बहुत एब्सर्ड लग रहा हो कि ये एक पैटर्न किसी ने क्यों बनाया था, बट दिस पैटर्न इज एक्चुअली सीन in nature, that is in the universe, at a lot of places, and somehow it has something to do with the universe, and that is why this is very interesting. Okay, and that is why we are studying this Fibonacci sequence, and you must already know that of what a Fibonacci sequence is. And now the problem in coding that we have to deal with is key. Okay, what if I want the 30th number in the Fibonacci sequence? How do we find it? How do you find the 30th number, or even if you want the 100th number, कि 100 पोजीशन पे क्या कौन सा नंबर आता है फिबोनाची सीक्वेंस पे, कैलकुलेट करने बैठोगे तो you will have to do all these sums. जो तुम numbers धीरे धीरे बड़े होते जाएंगे, and it won't be very easy dealing with that big numbers and calculating till 100. And hell, even you can calculate it 100. What if you want the Fibonacci number that occurs at maybe 3500? 3500 नंबर पे कौन सा फिबोनाची नंबर आता है? That is not possible that you will calculate this way, right? So what we do is we write a function very similar to recursion. As you can think, recursion is also something like this only, that we keep one. If we want to find the nth element or the maybe 100th element, we multiply 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into karte karte, we go till 100. This is also very similar, a little bit complex in how the next number is found, but it is very similar in the, from a very broad perspective ki, okay, there is a little same operation that we keep doing, and we keep finding the next element. Now one difference is there between the factorial in the Fibonacci in the operations part, that Fibonacci requires two numbers, the two previous numbers, whereas factorial में if we know, okay, 4 factorial कितना था, फोर्थ नंबर कौन सा था हमारे फैक्टोरियल के उस लिस्ट में, 24. तो फिफ्थ क्या होगा, we just need 24 into 5, हम into 5 कर लेंगे, we just need 24. ठीक है, बट यहाँ पे if we want to see 8 के बाद क्या आता है, सिर्फ 8 से काम नहीं चलेगा, we also need the previous number 8 and 5 so that we can add them up and go to 13. Okay, so ये वाली चीज है फिबोनाची. I hope you understand the basic part, but abhi we are running a little short on time. Jay Bhaiya has his live session after this at 7:30. So we will wrap up here. Do study about the Fibonacci sequence and do study कि Fibonacci sequence nature में कहाँ दिखता है, why is it important, and how beautiful its not applications but its appearances are in nature. So ये चीज़ें देखना, फिर you can also try to figure out कि Fibonacci sequence को हम as a function कैसे लिखें, कि हम ऐसा एक function लिखते हैं कि def Fibonacci और हम यहाँ पे n दे दे, तो it returns me the nth value of the Fibonacci sequence. ठीक है, so that is what you have to do before the another session tomorrow. We'll have another session, we'll talk about recursion, and then we'll also talk about a few more data types, the like lists and strings we talked about, but we did not talk much about their operators. There are different functions for, particularly for strings, particularly for lists. We're going to talk about those as well. So एक और चीज जो अनअकैडमी के साइड से आ रहा है तुम लोगों के लिए, I wanted to show, that is a new channel that is called Unacademy Empower. And give me a moment. Yeah, so this is about कि देखो, सब लोगों को obviously कोडिंग में नहीं जाना होगा, सब लोगों को कोडिंग पसंद भी नहीं आता होगा, मान लिया, बट अगर तुम्हें इस फील्ड में जाना है, you want to get into jobs, good high paying jobs, another avenue is product management. Another avenue is product management, जो कि बड़ी बड़ी कंपनीज like even Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Netflix, even छोटी कंपनीज, स्टार्टअप्स, हर जगह पे तुमको प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर की जरूरत हर एक कंपनी को होती है. सो दिस इज अ रोल, दिस इज अ basically a opening in a company that is very important, and a lot of companies are hiring product managers very actively from different colleges, even offline माने off campus as well. So product management अगर तुमको सीखना है, if you are not very much into coding, so you can go and learn product management. And product management का basic I guess सबको आना चाहिए. So Unacademy is launching a new channel called Unacademy Empower, and वहाँ पे you will have educators जो actual industry में as a product manager काम कर रहे हैं, and they will teach you product management from the very basic, very scratch, कि तुमको मिलेगा प्रोडक्ट मैनेजमेंट एकदम, तुम्हें अगर कोई आइडिया नहीं है होता क्या है तो वहां से भी तुम स्टार्ट कर सकते हो, एंड यू कैन लर्न अबाउट हाउ टू डू प्रोडक्ट मैनेजमेंट, क्या क्या रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज होती है, कैसे प्रोडक्ट्स को आइडिएट करना होता है, कैसे उनको मैनेज करना होता है, तुम्हारे एक एक कंपनी के साथ तुम्हें कौन से टीम्स के साथ तुम्हें काम करना पड़ता है. यू विल गेट टू नो ऑल ऑफ दैट फ्रॉम वेरी क्रेडिबल पीपल जो एक्चुअली एज अ प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर इन द इंडस्ट्री काम कर रहे हैं इन डिफरेंट डिफरेंट बिग कंपनीज. तो if product management is something that you are dreaming of, that you want to pursue, definitely go over to the new channel and look out for it, the Unacademy Empower channel. And with that, we will conclude our session for today. Thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot for attending this session. And I will bid you a goodbye, and I will see you tomorrow with this recursion, with this Fibonacci, and a few more string and list. हमारा जो Python basics वाला पार्ट था वो थोड़ा थोड़ा खत्म हुए आ रहा है. वी आर ऑलरेडी पास द हाफ वे स्टेज. इसके बाद हमको थोड़ा डिक्शनरीज पढ़ना है, थोड़ा सा अबाउट ऊप्स पढ़ना है हमको, जो ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड प्रोग्रामिंग होती है वो, उसको थोड़ा पढ़ना है. उसके अलावा विल बिल्ड अ फ्यू प्रोजेक्ट्स, वेरी स्मॉल स्मॉल प्रोजेक्ट्स, बट यस वी विल बिल्ड देम. एंड अदर देन दैट, उसके बाद यू कैन गो इन टू लर्निंग AIML AITS जो भी तुमको सीखना है. इस बस हमने कितना और मे बी 2-3 हफ्ते में विल फिगर एवरीथिंग आउट, विल लर्न द होल पाइथन का जो बेसिक्स, जो प्रोग्रामिंग बेसिक्स हमको चाहिए था वो सारे फंडामेंटल्स हम सीख जाएंगे, एंड वी विल बी गुड टू गो. So again, thanks a lot for attending this session,